Direct Connection is made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you. Live from Maryland Public Television, this is Direct Connection with Jeff Salkin.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for tuning in for Direct Connection. Coming up tonight, a stunning number of childhood injuries are being treated incorrectly. We will learn why in our Your Health segment. First tonight, it is almost spring cleanup time. Tonight, we get answers to your questions about what can and cannot be recycled. Joining us is Clyde Trumbetti with the Baltimore County Department of Public Works, Bureau of Solid Waste Management. Clyde, thanks for coming by.
Yeah, nice to be here, Jeff.
We have a lot of recycling things we can talk about. We see some examples here, but I want to start with the thing that's behind here, which was the plastic bag that you brought this in. Last time you were here, last summer, you talked about not throwing these in with the rest of the stream of recyclables.
Right, that's
Why?
correct.
What happens?
The reason for that is, Jeff, when we introduced single-stream recycling about 5 years ago, the type of equipment that we really need to separate paper out from most of the kind of things you see here, your bottles and cans, requires a lot of spinning gears in there, what we call rotating star screens. And this plastic bag works like string or a vacuum in your vacuum cleaner roller, and it just gets tied up on all those pieces of equipment.
It must happen all the time.
It does. Even after 5 years of telling people no plastic bags, we still get plastic bags, plastic film. But what happens is that facility up in Cockeysville can process 30 tons of material per hour. So a lot of materials going through that. When these plastic bags get in the equipment, they reduce the efficiency, its separating ability, and then to the point of where they have to shut everything down, people actually have to climb into these pieces of equipment and cut out all the plastic film and plastic bags.
Okay, so don't throw them into the recycling, and I'm sure you don't want us to throw them in the trash either, so what are we supposed to do with the thing?
The best thing is where we go a lot of times, and that is back to the grocery stores, but other stores have bins at the front door where you can put your plastic bags back in. And it's a very reusable material. Most of the composite lumbers that we see today, that's where your plastic bag and plastic film material is going back into. So it gets reused, it keeps it out of the environment. Of course, plastic's made from oil, and therefore we don't need to pump quite as much oil to make plastic bags. The
other thing we hear about when you have a container of some sort or a jar, do you have to rinse it out?
We really only ask people to do a quick rinse, because the thing is, the process of recycling, not our stage, we're just really in the early separating stage, but when it goes down to making the new materials, they get cleaned quite a bit. So we don't really want people spending a lot of energy and resources, namely water, trying to clean these out when there's no reason to. Nice thing with all these bottles and containers that might have liquid in them, we ask you to put the cap back on that container. And then that way, that material doesn't even make it into your container or seep out into your container. Those caps are all recyclable, and like I said, it helps you in your storage capacity as well.
You were telling me your sorting facility has been open a year now.
Right.
What are you seeing in terms of trends, the volume that's gone through there?
Well, we have a lot of material coming through. In 2014, we had total recycling that people put out for us was a little over 54,000 tons of material. So that we've got a lot coming in and we've got a lot going out. Of course, that material all gets made into something new. So we're giving that material a new life and saving the resources in the earth at this point, too.
Let me remind our viewers, if you have a question about recycling, not only Baltimore County, but whatever part of the state you live in, give us a call. We'll have the number up on the screen. You could also tweet a question. Our Twitter address is @MPT News. So the peg for this, the reason we were anxious to see you now is the idea that it is going to be spring. I'm really excited. Right. I think it's around the corner. And I'm planning to clean out the garage.
Right.
So that means old paint cans. What do I do with that stuff?
Well, here in Baltimore County, we have a full-service household hazardous waste site, which is located over at the Eastern Sanitary Landfill in the White Marsh area. So between April 1st through the end of November, we take all types of hazardous waste. Now, you mentioned paint. If you only have a little bit of paint left in a can, what we recommend is open that can, put some kind of drying gauge in it, cat litter, newspaper, let it dry and harden, and you can throw it into your regular trash. But if you've got a lot of paint, and a lot of us do, then the good thing to do is if you take it over to Eastern, they'll mix that up into 5-gallon containers of various colors, and then that paint is used. It's given to an organization called the Loading Dock, and then they use it for all kinds of projects. Because again, recycling is great, but we like to try and use things and reuse things as much as we can.
Let's take some phone calls. This is Clara in Harford County. Clara, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Hi, I just purchased a new paper shredder for my home office, and with it came some individual bags to use to line and collect the shredded paper. Those plastic liner bags are marked with the recycling symbol, but it sounds from your guest like that is not appropriate packaging to put the shredded paper into my recycling bin. What should I do?
Great question. Thank you very much.
Well, Clara, you're correct. I mean, the plastic bag may have a number 2 or whatever number on it for recycling, and that really meant the kind of polymer that it was made from. It doesn't mean that it can be recycled unless a facility exists. And what we want to happen with that plastic bag is, again, maybe go back to the grocery store so that it can be turned into something new, but in our facility it causes a problem. So that really, if you use a plastic bag to start with, you would want to empty that into your recycling container or maybe a cardboard box. Because all of Harford County's recyclables do come down to our facility here in Cockeysville to be sorted out as well.
Let's talk to Karen in Baltimore County. Karen, thank you for the call. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Joyce calling from Baltimore.
Close enough. Go ahead.
I'm just turning on the number, and for lots of paint cans that are half full, what do I do with them?
All right. Thank you very much. I think the idea with a half-full paint can is to dry it out, preferably.
Well, if you have maybe only one, you may not want to take that all the way down to our center if you're in Baltimore County. But if you have many, as it seemed like she was indicating, then it's really worthwhile to take them down to our center so that you can have that paint reused.
What else did you bring along? The little juice carton.
Right.
Those things, I mean, they look like paper, but it's a multi-layered thing in there, right?
It's a multi-layered item. We have the juice container, just like this container here that had the orange juice in it, and those we can take for recycling as well. They generally have pretty high-grade paper in there, and since they're designed to keep the juice or whatever its component was from sinking into the paper, it's fine for those to be recycled at that point. The one thing we can't take is like the little foil pouches that you would punch a straw into, but the little boxes are fine.
How much of what people put in the recycling bin isn't actually recyclable, and you guys wind up trashing it?
Well, really, when you look at what comes into our facility and then what goes out, we have anywhere between an 85 to 90% capture rate of material.
That sounds pretty good.
It is pretty good, really, when you consider the huge variety of things that come in. Number one, like I said, there are a lot of times where something shouldn't have been in there to start with, and that's part of that 10%. And then through the whole process, we do lose a little bit of material as well.
St. Mary's County, let's talk to Paula. Paula, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Hello. I
Hello.
use the plastic bags that come around the newspaper to pick up after my dog, bring it in the house, dump the contents into the toilet, and then I'm left with the bag. And from what I understand from the program, I can't put that bag in the recycling. I have to put it where, in the garbage?
Well, again, when we are looking at St. Mary's County, I'm not exactly sure what your program is, but I'm sure the idea that if it's been used to pick up dog waste, you would want to put that directly into the trash can and not put it into anything for recycling.
Here's a Twitter question. When will electronics and municipal composting pickup happen in Baltimore County?
Well, electronics, we have 3 drop-off centers around the county, one on the west side in the Healththorpe area, up in Cockeysville, and then again in the White Marsh area. All 3 of those centers all year long take electronics for recycling. Now, we don't take the TVs and monitors for recycling. Those are disposed of if you bring them to us, but everything else then electronically is recycled at that point.
So if somebody has that old TV in the garage or the basement, they want to get rid of it, what's the right thing to do?
Well, there's a couple of things they can look at and see if there's any company that may take that item back for them, even if there's a small fee. Or again, if they do come to us, then we dispose of them in the proper way. But they are not being recycled at this stage.
Wicomico County, this is Jim. Jim, thank you for the call. Go ahead. Hello, Jim. Are you there? Jim?
Yes.
Yes, sir. You're on.
I want to know if this year you're going to have a tire recycling program.
Good question. Thank you.
Okay.
Again, not Baltimore County, but...
Right, and unfortunately I can't answer that. I don't know what Wicomico County is doing for tire recycling. Here in Baltimore County, again, a resident can bring up to 4 tires off the rim if they're regular car tires to our drop-off center, and they will be recycled.
What's the single thing that for folks working in the sorting operation that they really wish people would stop putting in the recycling bin? Well,
the biggest thing is, again, these plastic bags that we talked about, because they're the ones that create the biggest problem. We try to get them out in a pre-sort area before it hits all the equipment, but once it gets past there, it can create problems for the equipment and for the whole center. We're looking at a facility that handles 30 tons per hour, and so that when you have to shut it down, you really decrease the amount of material you can put through.
Let's talk to Barbara in Howard County. Barbara, thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Yes, I live in an apartment house in Howard County, and we have a garbage chute, and we separate the garbage from the trash by putting the garbage in plastic bags. I don't know how else I would get it down the chute if we don't throw it in loose. So I don't know whether Howard County has the same problem that Baltimore County has. We probably use a different recycling or...
Yeah, not sure we can answer that, but Barbara, thank you very much for the phone call. I did want to ask you,
Sure.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Howard County, I believe, sends their material down to Elk Ridge, and that facility is pretty similar to where we are. So that if it is in plastic bags, they run the same kind of problems that we do. So now, when she was saying trash and a trash chute, if it's pure trash, it's going either into a landfill or it's going to a waste-to-energy facility. Those are our only other 2 options to deal with trash.
I wanted to ask you about K-cups, those little coffee pods that have become very popular.
Right.
I read somewhere that the inventor of those was expressing remorse for the environmental impact of it, because it's a little bit of plastic, but it's also a little bit of metal or something else on top. Can you recycle those?
Well, my understanding is that the cup itself could be recycled, but most people, when they go to a K-cup, want convenience, and so that you have to do 2 things. You would have to take off that foil plastic laminated material on the top and then dump out what may ever be in there, if there's coffee grounds or something, before you're able to put the K-cup into the little white cup into the recycling container.
What do you see in terms of newspapers? I'm wondering if, as newspaper readership has shifted online, if you're getting less of it than maybe you used to.
We do get less newspaper than at one point, but we still get a lot. Most of what people throw away by weight is newspaper. Or as paper, I should say. So whether it's in the form of one of these containers or newspaper or a magazine, it's still the majority of what we throw away by weight.
And last question I had was CFL light bulbs, little compact fluorescents. What do we do with those?
Well, again, at all 3 of our drop-off centers, we take all kinds of fluorescent tubes, whether they're the tubes or the CFLs. So
I asked because of the little bit of mercury content in those.
Right, that's correct. We want to try and keep that out of the environment.
Very good. Clyde Trombetti of the Baltimore County Recycling Department, thank you for coming by.
Jeff, thank you.
We appreciate it. Just ahead tonight, a recent study finds that many child fractures are not properly treated. What you need to know coming up in our Your Health segment.
Tonight on MPT2.
Hi, I'm Mark Wahlberg. Join Antiques Roadshow on our search for America's hidden treasures.
There are a lot of fakes on the market. The question every time you see one is this real or is it not real?
To a high-end interior designer, obelisks are the cat's meow.
Holy moly! Next time from San Diego, California on Antiques Roadshow.
Tonight at 8 on MPT2.
In a concentration camp where death was the only way out.
I met, and I said, God, please help me.
It's a story few people know.
I can imagine that it really was true, what the German did to us.
The condemned found hope.
We kill as many Germans as we can.
And escaped.
Tonight at 9 on MPT2.
Get ready for the return of Motown 25 on your public television station.
Everybody say what? Baby, everything is all right. Uptight. Now it's to say, all right, everybody.
Monday night at 8 on MPT.
Joining us for this week's Your Health segment is Dr. Joshua Abzug, Professor of Orthopedics and Pediatrics at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, Chief of Pediatric Orthopedics at the University of Maryland Medical Center, and Deputy Surgeon-in-Chief at the University of Maryland Children's Hospital. Doctor, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
At the beginning of the program, we mentioned a study indicating that a lot of childhood injuries are being treated inappropriately. We're talking about fractures. What did the study find?
So let's just back up 1 second and clarify what fractures are. So fractures equals broken bones. So quite often people come in and say, is my child's arm broken or fractured? And just so we're all on the same page, they are the same thing.
Right.
And what we looked at in this study was what happened when the splints got put on in either an emergency room or an urgent care center. Was the splint appropriate? Was the position the correct way? Did they miss a diagnosis? And was there any injury caused by the splint that was placed? And the conclusion of our study, we found that 93%, almost every splint that's put on, or 9 out of 10 splints that are put on in either an emergency room or an urgent care center for a child fracture, is placed suboptimally or incorrectly, depending on how you want to look at it.
Are there degrees of that? Were some of them placed in a way that would really cause some harm and some of them just maybe not perfect?
Yeah, so the vast majority were not perfect, quote unquote, but we did have a subset that did cause some complications. So that was our secondary finding. About 15 to 20% of the splints will actually lead to some sort of complications. Those complications consist of increased swelling. They can actually cause wounds on a child. So what will happen is at the edge of a splint, let's say, for example, the splint stopped right at the end of my wrist here, beneath my thumb. The end of that splint or edge of that splint will actually dig into the child's skin. And a young child may not tell you what's going on, especially if they have a broken bone. They may just think this is normal pain. But over time, that splint will actually cause a wound. And there's a study that showed that 6 to 10 children actually wound up needing free flaps or muscle or skin taken from somewhere else in the body to cover a wound created from a splint.
Wow. So in a fracture, the splint isn't the ultimate treatment, right? I mean, am I right in thinking it's a temporary measure before somebody like you or an MD can place a cast of some sort?
Yeah, typically most fractures are treated in a cast. The splint is placed in these urgent care emergency room settings, and the goal of the splint is a fewfold. One is to stabilize the fracture. What actually hurts the most is when the bones can move back and forth. So the purpose of the splint is to stabilize the fracture, and then secondarily it will decrease pain and decrease swelling. Ideally, a child's seen within a day, 2 days, by the orthopedic surgeon where definitive care can be placed. However, lots of things pop up in life. Car may break down, may have trouble getting an appointment. In the winter that we just had, maybe a lot of snow and your appointment may get pushed back. And sometimes these splints that were meant to be on for a day or two wind up being on for a week or two. And this is what really the problems that can occur.
So is the takeaway here for a parent, grandparent who's watching and a child is injured, and say it's a weekend and the urgent care center is the only place you're going to see somebody, is the takeaway that you pretty quickly need to then get the follow-up appointment?
So I think it's always best to be seen as soon as possible by the person who's going to provide the definitive care for the injury. However, some complications can occur very quickly. So there's a condition known as compartment syndrome. All of our muscles are grouped inside an outer tissue layer, what's called fascia. And the analogy is to think of like a hot dog with that outer coating. Well, if swelling occurs enough and there's no room for that muscle to get bigger, ultimately what will happen is that muscle will die. Also, those nerves inside that compartment can die. And that can lead to permanent deficits. And that can happen right away. If a splint is placed too tightly, within a few hours, this compartment syndrome can develop, and a child can lose complete function in an upper or lower extremity.
Wow. So what's the alternative, since there aren't a lot of orthopedic surgeons with Sunday afternoon hours?
Sure. So I think it's great to go and have the child placed and seen in an urgent care emergency room setting. That's what they're there for. And they're there ideally to stabilize any acute injury and recognize anything that's going to be suboptimal in nature. I think there's a couple of key takeaway points. If your child's continuing to complain of pain after the splint is on, something's wrong. The child should be feeling better and better with time. They should be on their pain medicine, and it should be controlling their pain. If they're not being adequately controlled with their pain, and you're seeing increasing swelling, especially, for example, in the hand or the feet, beyond where the splint ends, you probably need to go back to the emergency room or urgent care center if you're on a Sunday. If it's during the week, call the orthopedic surgeon and get in as soon as possible within a few hours. You don't want to just let that child continue to be in pain unnecessarily.
So is that an argument for maybe if there's a choice between the local ER and the urgent care center, and you're thinking the ER may take a bit longer, maybe the level of care might be higher?
So I think there's pros and cons of both situations. I think there's more resources in most of our emergency rooms with the hospital attached, but I think timing is a factor. In an urgent care center, they typically can get you in and out much faster than in an emergency room setting.
Where do the injuries typically occur? What sort of, in the pediatric setting, what bones are being broken and how's it happen?
So one of the most common fractures is finger fractures and then followed by wrist fractures, super common injuries. Most commonly, they occur from sports participation. That's one of our most common injuries. And then there's a few injuries, a couple of rules I have for my children. So
I've heard of the no trampoline rule. Is that where we're going?
No trampoline is a good one.
Strictly enforced.
And no monkey bars. That's another good one. So monkey bars are great with appropriate supervision. The problem we see, especially in the fall or springtime, we have children that weren't quite old enough to do the monkey bars last year, and now they're kind of old enough to do them. And they get up there and they start climbing, but maybe they're not quite strong enough to keep their body up. When you think about the height of a monkey bar, you're up a good 6-8 feet. When that child falls onto an outstretched hand, very often fractures can occur.
How often do you see a trampoline-related injury?
At least once a week, usually more than that.
And is there a way, I mean, you see them in backyards all over the place, sometimes in settings that don't look terribly safe, and sometimes you see them with like a net around it. What do you recommend, aside from the no trampoline rule?
So I think, so that's my personal rule. I don't know, trampoline companies would like that, but that's my personal rule for my family. But I think a net is a great thing. It does prevent major injuries from occurring from a child falling off of a trampoline, for example. Another big rule is not to have the springs exposed, if possible, because when a child jumps up, they can land on the springs. I think the most important rule really is one person should be on the trampoline at a time. The most common time we see an injury is when there's more than one person on a trampoline. So as someone's coming down, another person's bouncing up, and they misplaced their step because the trampoline mat is now lower than it should have been, and that's when the injuries can occur.
Everything we were talking about with splints and kids, does it apply to adults as well, do you think?
So I think it's totally true in adults as well. We have seen it, but because of my practice, I don't see as many adults, and we didn't study it in adults. But I think the same principles hold true for adults as well.
Lastly, I've seen instances where you're not sure if it's a break or a sprain, and in that case, I guess you're still going through the same network of care.
So this is where children's bones are actually different than adult bones. In adult bones, the ligaments are stronger than the bones. So when you roll your ankle, for example, you actually will tear a ligament more commonly in an adult. However, in a child, the ligaments are much stronger, and the weakest part of the child's musculoskeletal system is actually their growth plate. So children will sustain growth plate fractures much more commonly than a sprain. Our general rule as we teach our residents and medical students is children don't sprain their ankles, they break their ankles. And that's true throughout the rest of the body as well.
Interesting. Dr. Joshua Abzug of the University of Maryland, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
We do appreciate it. Thank you for joining us for Direct Connection. We're back Thursday with Your Money and Business. Have a good night.
Your health segments are a co-production of Maryland Public Television and the University of Maryland Medical System.
This program was made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities.